Alright, so welcome back to Eco's The First Continent, starting strategies for preset footprints. Now, in this video, we're going to be going over the gorilla footprint. And I'm not going to lie, the gorilla footprint is definitely one of the hardest footprints to win with. You'll most likely will lose if you get stuck with this particular footprint. But in previous games, it's because the player didn't realize what cards would be best to be played in a particular order. So if you ever get stuck with this footprint in a game of Ecos, you're definitely going to want to make sure you watch this video, because you're definitely going to want to know the best way to play this particular footprint. If you do, you might have a better chance at winning with this footprint. And it could be possible that you could blow everybody out of the water with a particular card in this footprint, but only if it is played in a particular order. So let's get started. So these are the three starting cards for this footprint. This one here isn't very useful in the beginning of the game, even though it's one of the first three you start with. And it's really easy to eco because all you need is 3 suns. You do get to play some mountains, so it wouldn't hurt to play it at least once to get a mountain out on the continent. But these two symbols, well, there aren't any of those symbols here, so they're not very useful. So you're not going to want to eco this too much in the beginning of the game. This one here, it's going to give you a grass, and it's going to give you some victory points per adjacent grass tile. And then it will give you a vine symbol as well, which you could technically use to help you eco this card as well. Now, the wild symbol is a bad idea. For this particular game, in the beginning of the game, the wild symbol isn't really going to be super useful. And I would recommend using your dial to get cubes. Of course, if it seems like you're getting your dial rotated more often than putting cubes down, I would recommend getting to play your card instead with a dial, and then using this to get some cubes, for sure. But if you're ecoing this before you rotate the dial 3 times, I would recommend playing a card. This is the card I recommend playing first. In this one, you only gain a vine symbol, but you only need the sun symbol to do it. The reason why this is a good choice, for 2 reasons. One of which, for at least a few times, you're not going to be ecoing this card. You can save it for later, and you can eco this time 4 times. And then you can place your vine symbol here to help you eco this one faster. So, that is definitely a choice and an idea. Although, you could also be potentially ecoing it a lot with this one too, but I would always recommend putting the grass symbol on this one before you even try on this one. So that way, you can eco this as many times as possible. And like I said, I would focus on getting some cards out. So, what would be the next card to get? This one here. Now, this one doesn't have a vine symbol on it at all, but at least it has the rock symbol on it. And so, then you could maybe potentially start ecoing this one if you have no choice, especially if this is long gone. Then at least, possibly, you could at least be getting the rock symbol used for this card here. And this one, you could potentially get a lot of victory points if there's already a lot of mountains out. So you always get 4 points, and then you could potentially get some more victory points as long as the mountain you placed is in the largest mountain habitat. So you could potentially get a lot of victory points. And of course, it doesn't have to be. If it's the only habitat, it's still technically the largest. It's still technically the smallest because there's only one habitat. But regardless of the case, you could potentially get some points with that card. But the real reason why you're playing this card is to get a lot of mountains out. We're not really worried too much on getting a lot of victory points with this card. There's no use crying over spilt milk if you don't get a lot of victory points with this card, because the point is to try to get some mountains out. Same thing with this one, to try to get some mountains out. Now, what's the next good card to get? Because like you said, you could eco this 4 times and play 4 cards. Well, this would be the next choice. The third card here, would be this one here. It lets you place 2 trees out, and you only need a vine and a sun symbol to do it. So that, and then you get 2 more vine symbols as well. So it could help you complete this one a little bit faster, maybe. Of course, in the end, you're definitely want to get more cards out that have vine symbols on them, for sure. Now, in a long game, I would recommend getting this one not next. In a short game, you might go for this one next. But if you're going to play a long game, this one might be the one to go after next. So this one here lets you place more trees out, but you get 6 victory points, and you could potentially get a lot more victory points per tree in this tree habitat. Like, if you've played this one already once, and this one as well, that's 3 trees already, so that would give you 9 victory points, assuming you placed this tree in the same habitat as these over here. And if you played this twice, that'd be 4, 5, that'd be 11 victory points. So since you can play this one 2 times, you could potentially get a lot of victory points with this card. So it is definitely worth playing, especially before that one over there. Now, if you've done a lot of these ecodes, you've ecoed this one probably once or twice, and you've ecoed this one maybe 2 or 3 times, and these a couple of times, or at least once for each of them, this one would be the card to go for. Now, if possible, it would be wise to try to make it so when you play this, that you could still play it twice. If you don't get a lot of victory points on the first time you eco this card, don't worry about it. Because if you ever score more than 16 victory points with this card, well, it goes bye-bye anyway. So you don't get to play it a second time if you scored more than 16 on the first round. So if possible, try not to get too many of these ecoed ahead of time. So you get 5 victory points after you place a gorilla. And the gorilla obviously needs a mountain in order to be placed. And so then you get 2 victory points for each tree in this mountain habitat. So if you've gotten some mountains down in more than one location, maybe a couple of them down, maybe 3 mountains down, and then you've got trees in the corresponding, the trees don't all have to be on the same spot with the mountain in order for the trees to be part of a habitat, but there needs to be at least one mountain within the tree habitat, and obviously the gorilla needs to be with the mountain in this tree habitat. But let's say the first time you play this, 5, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. If there was 5 trees with one mountain, if there were 5 trees with this gorilla, if this gorilla had 5 trees in the habitat, you would score 15 points. And that would still be below 16. 15 points is a lot. So if you were to play this one twice and this one 1 time, that would be just enough to score a ton of points with this one without actually having to discard it after you played it. And then the second time you ecoed this time, it would be better to get some of these out, some more of these out as well, if possible. And of course, don't forget about this one. It would be good to eco this a few times as well, so that way you'd have more landmass, more grassland to place your mountains and trees down to increase the possibility of getting even more points than 16. And this, like I said, could potentially win you the game if you played it in a particular order, in this order, and assuming that other players weren't destroying your trees and your mountains and your landmass with their strategies. You could potentially score a huge amount of points and win the game with this one card. Now, if you've played this one twice and you still have, and this game is still going strong, and the game isn't over, don't fret. There are still some cards that will get you some victory points that aren't in the starting 8 here that I've already picked out. One of them is this one here. You get to place another grassland, so if you need more grassland, this wouldn't hurt to get out before you finish this one. You'd get 4 victory points, and then you could potentially make 2 different land masses and get a couple more victory points as well with this card here. Another good card would be this one here. If another player doesn't have the symbol that's been placing tons of oceans out, oceans out with their particular footprint, and there's a huge landmass, it could be this would be a potentially good card to play as well, because you would want to go with the desert for sure, or maybe water if you want to play this a bunch of times, though I would go with the desert. And then you get 5 victory points if not within 2 spaces of another water. So if you've got a big landmass and you get to play this a few times, you could get a lot of points with that card there too. So these cards, this card, and this card, these 3 could potentially give you a lot of points for sure, and that would be useful. Even this one could give you a few points as well, and it's a one-time use though. Then this one is okay too because it does give you some more trees and mountains, and you get a couple of victory points. So this could potentially be good to play if you still haven't ecoed this card, or even this one. You could potentially get some more victory points as well. Or for that matter, this one as well. You could potentially get some more victory points with these ecoed after this one was ecoed here. The only card here that isn't worth playing out of the 12 is this one here, because you don't have, first of all, in the beginning of the game, you have a lot of cards that have the grass symbol, but most likely they will have already been removed from the game, and so therefore that wouldn't be very useful. The antelope might be useful for the gorilla, but it's the only card that has the antelope for this footprint on the card. So this one isn't very useful because of that reasoning. And there's only one card that isn't in the starting 3 that has the grass symbol on it. So this one isn't very useful. And you should never go with this card unless you have gotten a lot of cards from the extra deck of cards here, and you've gained a lot of cards that way and played them. But otherwise, I wouldn't recommend playing with this one here. That's the only one. So the one you should never play with, or at least most of the time, is 45. You should never play with 45. And so, I hope you guys liked the gorilla strategy, and if you ever get stuck with the gorilla, maybe you'll have a better chance. Alright, we'll be back in the next video.